I tracked down the most overlooked movies of the 80s. Movies where Scorsese makes a comedy, Harrison Ford loses his mind in the jungle, and a thief pulls off the most tense heist you've never seen. Can you name even half of them? I'll bet you can't. After Harrison Ford wrapped up the original Star Wars trilogy and back-to-back Indiana Jones hits, he could have kept riding that action hero wave. Instead, he went in a completely different direction with the Mosquito Coast in 1986, taking on the role of Ali Fox. But Ford's Fox is nothing like Han Solo or Indy. He's a frustrated inventor who uproots his entire family and drags them into the heart of the Latin American rainforest. He's convinced he can build a utopia from scratch. Things go sideways when a missionary, played by Andre Gregory, shows up. Fox's grand vision spirals into ego-driven chaos, and he's dragging the entire community with him. What stands out here is Ford himself. This is one of his most layered, unpredictable performances. A guy coming apart at the seams, and you're watching it happen in real time. The social commentary is not subtle here, but subtlety wasn't the point. Ford said it's one of his favorite roles, and you can see why. The Mosquito Coast is what happens when a big star goes all in on something riskier, and he really pulls it off here. John Hughes was behind just about every coming-of-age classic in the 80s, but Some Kind of Wonderful gets overlooked way too often. He wrote and produced, but handed the director's chair to Howard Deutsch. The setup sounds familiar. A blue-collar kid named Keith, Eric Stoltz, somehow ends up dating the popular girl, Leah Thompson. That kicks off all the drama. Her ex is not happy, and Keith's best friend, Mary Stuart Masterson, suddenly realizes she might feel more than friendly. What sets this apart from the other Hughes movies is how grounded it feels. Deutsch brings a more realistic vibe to the characters, so it doesn't just feel like a fairy tale. You get the same great 80s soundtrack, the same awkward love triangles, but everything's got more weight. Compared to Pretty in Pink, there's just more maturity and honesty here, and the whole thing benefits from it. Joe Dante spent the 80s making some of the most offbeat movies you could get away with in Hollywood, but Innerspace is his wildest swing. Dennis Quaid is a reckless pilot, Martin Short is a nervous supermarket clerk, and Meg Ryan's in the middle. The premise alone sounds nuts. Quaid's character gets shrunk down in a government experiment, then accidentally injected into Short's character to keep the tech from getting stolen. Suddenly, you've got a miniaturized man flying around inside someone else's body, and the only way out is for the world's least likely hero to step up. Innerspace bombed at the box office, but once it hit home video, people finally got what Dante was doing. This was supposed to be a straight sci-fi thriller, but they flipped it to comedy, and that's what makes it work. Martin Short gets to go all in on the slapstick, but there's still enough sci-fi weirdness to make it more than just a spoof. It's part spy movie, part madcap adventure, all Dante. If you love movies that don't play by the rules, Innerspace is for you. Before Michael Mann turned Miami Vice into a cultural phenomenon and made some of the slickest crime movies of the 90s, he kicked off with Thief back in 1981. James Caan plays Frank, a professional jewel thief who's done with the business and wants one last big score before walking away. He lines up a diamond job in LA, but of course it all goes sideways. The mob boss backing the job double-crosses him, and suddenly Frank's family is in the crosshairs. Instead of folding, Frank pushes back and takes the fight straight to the mob. Even as a first film, Mann comes in with style. You can see the confidence that's going to run through all his later movies. Those neon colors, those precise shots, the cold, clean energy. Caan's performance is a masterclass in understatement, and he later called Thief one of his own favorite films. Budget-wise, Mann had nowhere near the resources he'd have later, but that actually works for the movie. There's nothing extra, just a lean and sharp neo-noir. Thief set the tone for everything Mann would do after, and honestly, it holds up better than most crime movies made since. After Carrie, Brian De Palma got back with John Travolta in Blowout, a suspense thriller that doesn't get nearly enough respect. Travolta plays Jack Terry, a sound effects guy for movies, out late one night in Philadelphia trying to get the perfect scream on tape. Instead, he accidentally records a car crash that turns out to be a political assassination. So Jack finds himself tangled in a bigger conspiracy chased by the real killer played by John Lithgow. Blowout takes De Palma's usual stuff, all the voyeurism and paranoia, but flips the focus to sound instead of sight. In a way, it's a cousin to Coppola's The Conversation, but De Palma cranks up the suspense and violence. It's like he's pulling straight from Hitchcock but making it his own. It's one of those movies where everything clicks, the style, the tension, the performances, and yet for some reason people rarely talk about it. But this is actually one of the best in De Palma's entire catalog. Everyone knows Scorsese for crime, for drama, even for music documentaries. But comedy? After Hours is proof he could have owned that genre too if he wanted. This is Scorsese's full-on dark comedy. One guy, one night in Manhattan, and everything goes wrong. Griffin Dunne plays Paul Hackett, an average office worker who just wants a simple night out, maybe a date in Soho. Instead, his night unravels into total chaos as he gets caught up with burglars and every weird character in Lower Manhattan trying to get back home. Scorsese never made another movie that's this much pure comedy, and that's honestly a shame. The energy never drops, the jokes land, and you still get that sense of danger running underneath the laughs. After Hours doesn't get mentioned with the big ones, but it should. It's one of those movies you put on late at night and suddenly 2 hours are gone. Dario Argento had already made himself a legend in horror with hits like Suspiria. By the late 80s, Argento was still making giallo movies, though not everyone hit the heights of his early career. Opera from 1987 stands out as maybe his last truly great film before his style shifted in the 90s. The setup is classic Argento, a masked killer haunting an opera house, zeroing in on Betty. The killer isn't just stalking her, he forces her to witness his murders, tying her up and taping needles under her eyes to make sure she can't look away. Opera didn't get much attention in the US at the time, but it's essential if you're into giallo. Argento pushes the violence and the tension right to the edge, and that sense of being forced to watch, powerless, is exactly what sets the movie apart from his imitators. Not for the faint of heart, it's actually pretty graphic, but for horror fans, this is a must. Way before In Living Color blew up and made TV history, Keenan Ivory Wayans was already poking fun at the tropes that Hollywood loved to repeat. Here, Wayans wrote, directed, and starred as Jack Spade, a guy who comes home from the army after his brother overdoses on gold chains. He finds out the local crime boss, Mr. Big, is behind it all and teams up with his mentor, played by Bernie Casey, to take him down. Of course, nothing goes according to plan. The whole thing is a send-up of blaxploitation, but done with real love for the genre. Wayans had a limited budget to work with, but he pulls it off with sharp satire and a killer ensemble. There's Isaac Hayes, Jim Brown, and more. Every scene feels like a nod to those old-school movies, but with enough new jokes to keep it fresh. It works because it never looks down on what it's spoofing. Instead, it feels like a celebration, and it's a sign of what Wayans and his family were about to bring to Hollywood in the years ahead. By the late 80s, Weird Al Yankovic was everywhere, cranking out parody hits and iconic music videos. This is his shot at the movies, with Yankovic playing George Newman, a dreamer who winds up running a failing UHF TV station. The station's fortunes turn when the janitor, played by Michael Richards, accidentally becomes a breakout star on live television. Suddenly, the weird programming and goofy sketches become a hit, and the station actually starts to turn around. Test screenings looked good, but when the movie hit theaters, it flopped. Critics didn't know what to do with it, and the movie quickly disappeared. That's a shame because this is basically a perfect Weird Al movie. His sense of humor, his music, all turned into one big, off-the-wall story. Michael Richards and Fran Drescher both shine, years before their sitcom careers took off. And even UHF bombed at first, it picked up a loyal cult following later, and now it's an 80s comedy classic that still holds up. Ridley Scott had hit a rough patch before Black Rain came along, but this movie put him right back on the map. Set between New York and Osaka, Black Rain drops Michael Douglas and Andy Garcia into the middle of a Yakuza mess. They play NYPD detectives who catch a Japanese gangster in New York and have to escort him back to Japan. Once they land, the prisoner escapes and the cops get pulled deep into the local underworld. So now they are chasing a counterfeiting ring that goes way beyond what they're used to. Scott uses the Osaka setting to the max, turning every alley and neon-lit street into something moody and dangerous. The cinematography and set design are top-notch, and both Douglas and Garcia are at their best. Douglas leans all the way into the morally gray anti-hero, and the movie never lets up. It's a tight, stylish crime thriller and one of the true hidden gems in Scott's career.